everyone, and welcome to the American Scouser podcast. Monday nights on a match day, we are back in action over here. I am your host, as always, Timuchin here in Chicago. Ridiculous storms outside as we speak, by the way. So if at any point the power goes out or something like that, you will know why. And no Gally today because he's on like a business event, also doing a business trip in Vegas, I'm putting those on quotations, is Bickler with us. Bickler, what's happening?
Yep, it's 95 degrees here and sunny, broadcasting from the MGM Grand Studios. But yeah, it is a business trip. I will be in an office 95% of it. I did walk to lunch today, which
There we go. The first Wi-Fi casualty
oh no. When I
of the
pulled a Shelton already.
Yeah, you're putting the best impression of Brian Shelton over here. Speaking of the devil, evening guys from a complete household after almost 2 weeks. Yes,
Yay.
finally everybody, all the dogs are back in action. Even got like the checkup and everything like that. And Ryan has apparently moved to Mexico, still eating tacos. I don't know what the hell's going on there, but he's been there forever. Sir Z Allen, welcome aboard, everybody. A lot to talk to about the game. I don't know how much of it were you able to watch the entire game?
Yeah, I was able to watch most of it. I mean, there's a few times that I had to get off just because I was paying a waiter. I was being rude in a restaurant watching the game on my phone. So yeah.
You were the kid at the table with the iPad.
Yeah, 100%. My mom will be right back. She's in the bathroom.
So let me ask you. I mean, look, we probably shouldn't care, but that's not how I am wired. I will care about what happens and the result and stuff. Doesn't matter who they're playing. I was rooting for Trent when he was playing freaking FIFA during the COVID and stuff like that. But it looked like, it's kind of sit back casual watching and stuff like that. But what do you make of the game overall? Or do you care about the results? I guess let's start with that.
I think I'm in the camp like you, where I probably care more than I should. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think the thing that I care about is like when we start dropping points because it feels like somebody's wants it more or is outworking us, and that's something that we really haven't seen in like almost a decade under Jurgen Klopp. Right? I mean, when he had his first teams, there was a deficiency of quality, right? And then as we sort of injected the transfers into the side and the system, that kind of knocked that out. And it's just very, very few and far between where you saw a level that dropped off because uh, of like a sense of apathy, which I think is the part that I struggle with.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page there. Like I say, I know it doesn't matter, like the points drop don't matter, none of that stuff matters. But when I watch the game, and I guess okay, so I don't know if this is an overreaction because as I watched, I was not I want to say irate, but I was annoyed, irked. Let's go with that. When I see like and I know the substitutions themselves might not have anything to do with how we conceded the goals and stuff like that. But the way I perceive it is we all know, and if we do, all the boys on the pitch, everybody knows that that's not something that Klopp does, right? We've never seen Klopp making 4 changes unless it was like a rubber game in Europa or something like that, and it was already planned and all that kind of stuff. So when they see that, I almost feel like even if the substitutions don't make, an impact, the entire mindset of everybody on the pitch changes because you are getting a message that's saying, meh, it is what it is, guys. Let's just wrap it up over here.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I think traditionally this is something I'd like to see the squad have done more of, is like rotate earlier and often and in more quality, but we know he doesn't do that, right? And like what's he doing? He's not resting for one more game, right? So yeah, I think it is really bizarre. And like it goes back to this dichotomy in like Klopp announcing his departure, right? And it being this beautiful new chapter in his life, and like we're supposed to celebrate it, right? Which is similar to how you hear people describe what they want to happen when they die as a funeral, right? So like like when I go out, I want people to celebrate it and really remember the good times, right? So that's kind of the similar feel we had, and we seemed like we had a sort of initial boost in how we performed as a team, coupled with generally some just good luck in general. But like, I can't get past the dichotomy of like, let's celebrate this final chapter of Klopp, and then Klopp coming out and looking like he's being like forced to attend his own funeral because that's what he looks like.
Yeah.
He looks like he looks exhausted, and B, he just looks like his bag's already packed. And I think that has to at some point trickle down to the rest of the team.
So I guess the question becomes, and I have not thought of this before. I know Gally has mentioned a couple of times. I mean, we can argue about when the announcement came. Could it have waited? Would it be better? Was it better coming from him? I think at the time, most of us agreed that it was better coming from him as opposed to leaking out when, and more importantly, what is it, 25 people or 30 people or whatever leaving, giving everybody, all those people, an opportunity to figure out what they're going to do with their lives and stuff might be important to Klopp. So I can respect all that. But now when I see today and when I see the last game, I mean, I almost was like, is this why we kind of derailed towards the end? Because we always wondered what the impact would be, right? Would they be like going hard, saying like a good farewell? Or at the same time, if your boss is kind of like going through the motions instead of maybe pushing you and driving you as they normally would, and as somebody who has had that manager for a long time, Gravenberg might not be able to tell this Klopp versus Klopp from 3 years ago, but Trent will, Robertson will, Van Dijk will, and all those guys. Do you think that's, or is that just an overreaction on my part that it might have something to do with while the form dropped overall, especially from guys who've been here for a while that we were waiting to come back from injuries and all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. I think there's probably, I think the reason, I think that we look for simple answers to complex things, right? And I think like sometimes, like when I look at the side, I think there was a physical wall hit with just fatigue in general. And then
Yeah,
I think when we dropped out, I mean, I think we need to like address the elephant in the room and that Manchester United like ruined our season.
right
Really did.
before the break, right?
Yep. Yep. And that's what they were playing for, right? And so I think I think collectively to have it done to us twice by them, I think when you are that fatigued, both emotionally and physically, and you have uh that sort of disappointment and that sort of let off where like you're going for potentially a quad and then not only does one of those come off the table but three of them do. I think that it's really really hard to not emotionally check out and the rest follows.
That's fair. Do you see anything? I mean, do you feel any of the, like the defensive errors, the lapse on focus, some like poor goals we've conceded, or heck, maybe the lack of finishing? Does it have anything to do with all the drama unfolding in the background, or it was just one of those things where people were in poor form at the same time?
I mean, I think the great mystery is why we continue to try to play out of the back when it's not the obvious answer to a problem, right? Like, I mean, I don't know, this game turns around on Alley making just the most boneheaded of plays up the middle of the pitch and Villa taking advantage of it, right? And just that terrible ball to Mac. And I think like it only takes one of those, but I think we've seen this over the duration of like almost 3 months now, where like uh, we make it real easy for people because at the same time that we're emotionally checking out, we can't get out of our own way. We can't play like fundamental football, like where you just tuck it away to the safe spaces on the side of the pitch. You keep it away from the middle in your own third, and like you just do football 101, right? And like
Yeah.
for whatever reason, like that is out the window.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the first goal we concede, for example. I'm like, how does that happen? And I know Kwanzaa
Yeah,
is a young kid, but even if there was miscommunication there with, even if Trent didn't say, hey, I'm here and I
right,
got the inside cut, by default, you should close out that part anyway.
right.
And he doesn't. He lets like Bailey run there. I don't know, like a lot of little things throughout the game. I just feel like, um, there's this, the force up, just like the Spurs game, didn't work, just lost our rhythm completely. And the thing that bugs me is it never would work. Like, I can't see a scenario, even if at our peak, if he changed, how many games did we play, like a League Cup or something like that, and we changed 6 guys and it looked like a totally different team? It was like, what is happening? These guys look like they played for. So when you put 4 people at the same time, shuffle the entire midfield and stuff like that, it was obviously it was not going to work. And I think that's really bugs me because Klopp seemed to be the kind of manager that would manage the same way until he punched out. That's what I kind of expected. And doing this and treating it like a rec game and like who wants to go in? It's like, I want to play defense, coach, kind of a thing. And letting people in there shows me he's like, man, it's one thing to say who cares when you're late to a press conference. But, and then when you talk about the away fans, didn't the away fans deserve for you to take the game seriously and not put 4 subs where you normally ever put them in?
I think this just goes back to the fact that Jurgen Klopp really, really doesn't care about the results. I think that's how tired he is. I think that's how emotionally exhausted he is. And I think that's just like, I mean, this is a guy that's put in his 2-week notice, has a vacation plan, and you can see it, right? And everybody has worked in an office and knows that dude, right? Like, it's like, that's what it feels like to me. And I think if I had a beer and could ask Jurgen Klopp one question, it would be like, how did you spend the greater part of a decade with a system that's so predicated on having an anchor and a 6 role and get away with only having one in the side that entire time? Because the entire time we rolled with just Fabinho, and then this entire time we couldn't get a 6, so we just rolled.
Oh man, your Wi-Fi in the hotel is doing some tricks again.
Yep. So that's it. No, I was just saying, I don't know how you get away with doing that for so long. And then we just, once Fab was gone, we just bought some 32-year-old Japanese dude in the Bundesliga we'd heard good things about and have just rolled that way. I don't know how we do that. And so when you sub in 4, right, in a game where you're down 2, you're probably going to concede when you don't have a true 6 that your system is really predicated on.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is sums it up perfectly. What Brian is saying here is that his exhaustion has become contagious. I think that's a perfect way to explain it. So kudos, Brian, because I, couldn't have said it any better. And I feel, because here's the thing, especially because of the way he manages. Like, he is the guy who's driving people from the sideline and pushing people, yelling, very energetic and stuff like that. When you take that away, if he was like Ancelotti, you probably won't know the difference in last season because it's the same dude. Like, he's just standing there. He doesn't show a lot of emotion. That's the way he manages. But when your management style is this and you go back to this just chilling mode, it's night and day. And if, as a player, if you're used to occasionally getting that kick in the butt and the drive from the sideline, and I know everybody's going to be like, these guys are professionals and stuff, but still, that's the system that you're used to. You're used to that guy barking there. When he's not barking there, I feel like the message that's being sent was so negative. I just hope it wasn't. And I just fail to see, Bickler, how it has not affected over the last couple of months. Just not today. It didn't just start today. It's hard to believe it just started today because he subbed 4 guys.
No, I mean, it hasn't, right? This feels like we talked about The Office, but this really does feel like when a whole chain of a retail store closes down, like a Blockbuster or something, and then everybody, all the employees are seeing out their last 2 months, right? And
whatever, man, if we have it, it's back there.
People are eating cheeseburgers at the register and stuff. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like.
But that's the thing that frustrates me because, I mean, like I said, I did that, right? I mean, we work with retail, and I did retail, and I was a general manager, and that's when I left, and people know I was leaving. But, and I remember even people joking and saying hey, we don't have a to-do list today and stuff, right? But it's no, you still have it because this is what we do. I just feel and I just felt at the time, it kind of hurts your, I mean, I didn't have legacy is probably a strong word, but you leave an impact on those people in terms of how you manage. They probably learned from you, or you work with these people 9 years, 10 years. I did the place I left. And so I think you leave with this impression, right? When you walk out the door in the same seriousness tone, you leave with that impression. When you leave the last 2 weeks, whatever, I would think it hurts that impression, and people say, "How much of was that fake?" Because this looks more real now, and that one looks all fake. What you were doing before.
Yeah, and maybe this is a little bit unfair to Jurgen, but for me, the thing that bothers me is like I feel like as somebody who's responsible for somebody else, right? Like this whole Liverpool family and like as a manager of anything, right? Like I feel like when you're transitioning out, you want to do what's in the best interest of for the people that work for you so that when the new guy comes in, you set a solid foundation, right?
Yeah.
And I just feel like that's kind of out the window. I sense a bit of apathy that I was not prepared to see from him. And maybe that's unfair. Maybe that's just me reading too much into it, but that's what I feel from it.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm kind of like irked, because I
Yeah.
feel the same way. Like, like Daz was saying, the same thing happened in the Spurs game. And you got to figure, as a player, wouldn't you feel that you're done? So you're done. I mean, it reminded me of, I actually was saying it on Discord. Like sometimes you play games, like not serious games, like pickup games or something like that, and a couple of guys stop playing before everybody else stops playing. And especially since I play defense, and people, it's like when midfields, a couple of the guys in midfield stop playing and stuff. He's like, "Hey, did you guys fucking get a memo over there that you didn't forward? Because we're still playing back here. So just because you stop running doesn't mean the game is done. We're still freaking like trying to defend back here, kind of a thing." And I just got that sense. And you might be right. It might be kind of unfair. Is it because we put this guy on like a ridiculous pedestal, probably mostly deserved in terms of like what he has done, and at the end he's just freaking human. He's just a dude who put in this 2 weeks.
I think that's part of it, but I also think that Klopp's legacy is not as much about how much of a tactician he is. It's more about how much of a like manager of men he is, right? And so like to see this as his way out the door uh is sort of a direct hit to what we know and what like his the best parts of him are, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's why it's the contrast is so stark, right? I think this is somebody who like maybe tactically is really brilliant, like a Mourinho or an Ancelotti. Like we don't feel that way at all about him leaving, like and being checked out, right? Like nobody's nobody's going to say that about either of those managers, right? But probably because they're on their 34th club by now. But like, we just their legacies are so much different than what Jurgen Klopp's legacy is as somebody who really knits himself in the fabric of the community and really sort of takes high character players and develops them. Like this runs against the grain of all of that.
And maybe he's just making it. See, maybe this is what the genius of Klopp is. He's making the departure a lot easier. Because if you saw Klopp the last 4 weeks, still like screaming and yelling in the same guy, we're like, "Man, you got more years left in you." Whereas now, I think we're looking, you're like, "Yeah, you're done, bro." Like,
Yeah.
you look done, you act done. Yeah, you probably should take some time off. Maybe he's just trying to like let us down easy. Because he looks like, I mean, he was saying it himself. I actually said this a month ago. I think he was talking about an interview the other day. People were like, "Oh, look at how he's aged and stuff." I mean, he's just freaking aged. It's been like a decade. But I think overall, you can kind of tell. I mean, this job is probably very demanding. It takes a high level, especially the way he manages. He just does not have that fuel anymore to be able to keep doing it.
I think in a lot of ways, like Jurgen's allowed us as supporters to escape from our daily life, right? But I think there's been no escape for him, right? And I think
Yeah.
over the course of a decade, that can really wear on somebody. So I think it's that. I think it's partially that. I think football is sort of past Jurgen Klopp. Like in terms of like, I don't think he's a manager that's going to adapt a system and change a system around him. I don't think he is a manager who like the more football becomes involved with technology and evolves and sort of progresses, I think a lot of those things sort of run against the grain of what he believes in. So I think there are some philosophical things that he struggles with. So I think it's accumulation of all that. But yeah, I mean, this just goes back to what Shelton said, where like I think he just is physically and emotionally exhausted. And like the ability to sort of cover that up and poker face it and progress into the next week, I think is just completely gone. And so I think there is this weird dichotomy where players want to play for him and want this to finish out on a high. And then I think the other part of it is like they feel this exhaustion, and for them, even if it's a just a tiny glimpse, it is one reason they can sort of let their foot off the gas even for a moment.
Yeah, that's right too. I mean, Ryan says as a man who has drunk 85 margaritas. Earlier, he said as a man who had like ton of ceviche. The past 2 weeks, believe me when I say I will be fine with his departure. Do you think though? Like I know you mentioned in terms of more than the game going past you. Is it a matter of it's gonna take even more energy to kind of like rebuild this thing? Like if I have like a fence panel that's kind of leaning the proper way, what I probably have to do is like, like take it off and putting in a new panel, rebuild the panel or whatever. Or I can just get a 2x4 in the back and screw the whole that thing in together. Whereas, obviously the other one, he just does not have enough energy to deconstruct and reconstruct again. And
Well,
not
I think that's
necessarily like he can't make the adjustments needed, but it's going to take even more work that he just does not have the energy for.
yeah, I certainly think the latter is probably true, right? I just think like at some point you get tired enough, you get old enough, you can make the change, you don't feel like it, which is me every day at work. But like I also think that like when you work for a boss who's that intense, right, and that demanding for that long, like I think that the players feel that fatigue too, right? So like I
Yeah.
think the managerial change is going to be great because I think you're going to get a new personality with a new tweak on a familiar system that's going to come in and make some changes. And I think the players feed off that energy, right? They now want to play good for a different guy because they don't, this manager doesn't know them intimately like Jurgen does.
Yeah.
So like they have to like I think the part of managing and building that relationship from a player standpoint re-energizes a side in a way because it brings everybody starts at zero, right? Like, and I think when everybody feels that, I think there's a recalibration that takes place. So I'm looking forward to that. We'll get more into specifics, I'm sure, over the summer. But with Slot being an attack-minded manager, everybody's excited for that. But I'm actually really excited for what he does from a defensive standpoint. I think we're looking at a team this year that scored the second most goals under a Jurgen Klopp's tenure in his history from the 21-22 side. So when we look at why we're fourth, it's certainly goal scoring, right? Everybody wants to dog on Darwin and talk about all our missed chances, but the bottom line is we're conceding at a rate that we've never conceded. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, Brian did mention this earlier too. Like the bad situation for Slot is he has a shortened off season, which with the Euros and the Copa America and stuff like that, that is going to be challenging. But I think, and I do want to kind of like pick your brain on this too, because Sir Z is talking about this, and I do want to get to that topic that maybe he now he feels he's being replaced by the very people that left because of him. It's more like, yeah, like he is gone. You guys can come back in, kind of a deal. At the time, we had to make a decision, perhaps, and we chose this way, which was probably the right way based on the results. I think, it's not like it has derailed us or anything like that for long-term planning, I'm saying. But so I do want to get to that. But before we get to that part with Ward coming back and stuff like that, in terms of players from today, anything you saw that's change your opinion or made you kind of like project into the future, like based on performance or based on role or whatever it might be?
I just think this side has so many questions, right? And that's my takeaway. There were some good performances today, right? I thought Gomez did fairly well at the left back in some tough spots, and I thought it looked really well going forward. I thought Elliott looked good. I thought Gakpo looked good. And this is, those are just those are all just big questions, like, right? At what point does Joe Gomez play a bigger role in this squad other than a backup, right? At what point is Elliott a starter in that midfield? What happens with Gakpo? Is he locked into a front three going forward next year? Like, there's so many questions that have to be addressed in this side. But from a performance standpoint, I thought that the three sort of best performers, like overall in the last like 2.5 months, were like the best performers today. Really, like in that order.
Yeah.
I really thought it was like Gakpo, probably Elliott, Gakpo, Gomez, right? And that's been the order.
Yeah.
With Diaz being fourth, that's kind of been the order, right? Like, so pretty consistent in terms of like how this has been down the stretch.
Yeah, because you're getting the same glimpses, right? Like you see Mac and you're like, man, that's a huge piece. And like some of the things he can do. I thought like some of the ball movements was just like fantastic to watch and stuff like that between him, between like like Mac and like Trent and Endo and stuff at times. Some of the triangles they were setting in midfield and stuff were like beautiful to watch. But see, now that you mentioned, Gomez and Elliott and stuff, let me ask you this, and because I don't think so, but let me ask you where you're at. If I gave you a starting 11 for next season, after like slot comes over, maybe there's a couple of new names in there that you didn't see before, whatever the changes are, and if I give you a starting 11, and then Elliott and Gomez are on there, would that make you say, oh yeah, this team is ready for a title run? Or are you going to feel that, man, if these guys are starting, then the squad is probably not ready for a title run? Because I think I'm in the former. I love both of them to death, and I think they should be a bigger part of the squad in terms of more minutes they gotten and maybe more starts and stuff. But I just feel like if I look at the starting 11 of next season and I see those two guys in the starting 11, I'm not like, man, we got the squad sorted, is not the feeling I'm getting. It might be unfair to those guys. What do you think?
No, I'm probably with you. I'm probably more comfortable with Harvey starting than Gomez, right? I think that's
Yeah.
probably the one that I feel like Gomez. I think is like I think that Gomez is his own worst enemy, and the fact that his versatility really makes it so that he's pigeonholed into a backup, right? Because you can play him at either fullback, you can play him at center back, and I just think he's sort of pigeonholed into that, and I don't think he's good enough at any of those three positions to supplant who's in front of him, right?
Yeah.
Unless he's really there because of injury and rotation, which I mean, you need those players, right? You need those players. So I think that's important. I love Harvey Elliott. I get why he should be starting right now. I just don't know, like, if you're talking about this team, like, is Harvey Elliott's upside greater than Soboslai's? Is it greater than
Yeah.
Gravenberch's? Is it great? You know what I mean? He's got some big, big fucking football names in front of him. And that's not to say he hasn't been good enough, because he has been every ounce of it. And he's deserved to start. He's deserved to start more football. I just think when you're looking at it on paper and you put some perspective behind it, it's really hard not to look at a player like Soboslai, where you got to figure out what you're going to do with him. And you got to look at a player like Gravenberch and know that, like, the ceiling is so high on both those players and they're still young. So I mean, and this is good problems to have. Like, this is what we talk about, quality and depth, right? So
Yes.
I still think, for me, I still think there's some big buys that have to happen in the summer. I still think if you're looking at the squad, I still think you have to address the fact that you need a colossus of a six. Like, you need a marquee six. I think you need that, and I think you probably need a center back. Granted, maybe we see some sort of a change in the system that doesn't require that, or doesn't really like look for as big of a role from the six, and maybe those things are adjusted when slot comes in, right? But from my standpoint,
Yeah.
those are the two biggest obvious needs. Kanata's got injury issues. Van Dyke's getting older. Kwanzaa shows it in spurts, but he also shows you why he's not ready. And then on the other
Yeah.
side, you got Trent, which you're not sure if you want to put him in midfield or not. And then you've got Andy, who's had the legs run off over the last 10 years of him. So how much you have of prime Andy Robertson? Probably not long. So you definitely got some questions there.
Yeah, Ryan Thompson says 6 cents CB for sure, with Matip being gone. By the way, John Ross earlier said it's his birthday. So happy birthday to John
Yeah,
over there.
man.
35 is freaking young, John. So yeah, unless you're over 50, we just take this as bad. Rubbing it in is how I take it as. So but happy birthday, bud. Yeah. Ryan says Elliott is a bigger name than Gravenberg. I almost feel like, with Elliott, you have like, as a guy who's, you played like FIFA and like, Football Manager and stuff. Elliott looks like the guy with the green arrow up. So he's playing
Yep.
a lot better than his rating show. Whereas you have Gravenberg and Elliott, like Soboslai and stuff, playing with the red arrow down. So it's playing a lot below their potential. I think with all things being equal, same thing with Kwanzaa. I think if I see a starting 11, I want Kwanzaa to be the squad. I want to be able to say, here's the starting 11. And then you have people like, I don't know if Konate will be considered a starter, but Kwanzaa for depth. How you refer to Matip as that? That would make me feel good if he is coming at that. If Kwanzaa is the starting center back next year, I don't know how comfortable I feel with that. I think it's the same thing with like Elliott. Same thing with like Gomez. I think I do want them as part of the squad, probably taking more parts, getting more chances and stuff like that, and be, I guess, closer to the starting 11. But I just feel like if that's your starting 11, there is not a lot of improvement that's going to be made. Or do you think the improvement is going to be mainly tactical with the same people? And this is going to kind of bring us to the conversation of Ward and Edwards and Hughes and all those people.
I think it's going to be sort of a weird combination of the two, right? I think we're probably not going to see as much change as maybe I thought or think, which I think this side could afford to be pretty aggressive with some of these changes. I think we'll see maybe like two big departures that maybe we didn't see coming. But I
Name
think
names, because you have somebody
I'm
in
not
mind when you
I'm
say
not
two. I
I'm
know
not
you.
convinced I'm not convinced Mo will be here next year.
Okay.
It wouldn't surprise me if somebody comes in with an offer for Jota or Diaz that we can't turn down. I think I could see either one of those taking a big money move somewhere. Um, I think those are probably the players that I look at the most. So I'm looking at like a frontline situation, right? I really don't think Darwin goes anywhere. I would be interested to see what happens if we got a big money like offer for somebody like Soboslai. I think it's not like Edwards to turn around and sell someone that we've recently acquired, right? Typically, he
Yeah.
just doesn't do that. He treats it like a long term hold on a stock. Like you're either going to burn it till it's nothing, or you're going to wait for it to double and then
Do you
sell
think
it.
it makes a difference who brought him in? Like for Ward and Edwards, because that's why one thing I wanted to ask you, because we were talking about it in the morning show as well. Do you think, because I think, Nunez came in that era, right? Wasn't like Ward one of the guys? Like, does
Yeah,
Ward say, no, I brought him because of this, as opposed to like Endo or Soboslai? They might say, who brought these guys? I would have never done that or something like that, and be more likely to sell.
well, it's interesting, right? Because I think we've got that quote from Edwards where it basically alludes to the fact that he hasn't been super happy with the last couple windows, right? Which shocker, either were we when Schmatke took over. But I think it's tough to know whether he's talking Darwin. What is he talking Carvalho, who thrives in a 10, which we don't play? I think maybe he just looked at some of these and was like, "What was the plan here?" Besides getting just a young talent, right? So I don't think. That being said, I don't think it's going to matter because I still think that he would. I think that he still treats it like the stock market. Like he's either going to say it's not a loss until it hits zero and you burn it, or you loan it out until it doubles and then you sell it. Like I still think you got to remember like this is the same guy that made a fortune off four players going to Bournemouth in like a 2.5 year span, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I think we got like 30 million for Brad Smith or something insane like that. Like just wild. So I think that there's going to be more of that coming back. So I don't think it's going to matter who brought him in. But I am genuinely excited to have him back because we've talked about it on the pod for the last couple of years. There does seem to be a disconnect with some of these players. Like, how long have we predicted that we were moving to a 4-2-3-1 based on the players we were
Yeah.
accumulating? Like, and then it never happened, and we were like, well, why did we get a dude who almost exclusively plays in a 10? And then we started him at left wing when we already have 7 left wingers. I just think we'll see less of that, thank God. And hopefully, I think it's going to get sorted, and I'm excited to see what kind of business happens with a new manager in sort of the old regime back.
Yeah, I kind of torn on that because you look at this lineup, and obviously, aside from the last 2 months, it was a team that was going for a triple or whatever. And I feel like you don't need a lot of pieces, right? If Klopp was staying, I think we're saying, probably still wants a number 6 and maybe another center back and stuff like that. So when I look at that, normally I would say, hey, maybe we don't need as many pieces. But at the same time, and I know what you're saying, maybe they don't want to totally blow it up because that is kind of setting up Slot for worse. But at the same time, don't you think it's a good time? If there was a good time to blow things up, now is the time, because you have some pieces that you can move and get good money and turn around to Slot and say, So how about this for what you do with this and stuff like that, and offer him some alternative as opposed to saying, well, let's see what you make it work out of this. And I'm sure these conversations have happened. It's not like he's gonna punch in and
Right.
he's gonna be like, I don't know if you've seen the squads, like he knows
Right.
probably there have been some discussions, but don't you think it's almost a good time? Because next season, I mean, I don't know, got to look at the contracts and stuff. I don't know whose contract will be ending and stuff, but it feels like right now is a good time to bring money and then give to Slot to bring his own guys.
For sure. And apparently they're going to give him quite a bit to spend, which, like this all has to do with conversations that we can't know behind closed doors, right? So, like when they meet with him, right, the conversation is, look, this is a side that's won a Champions League and is largely unchanged. We brought some key pieces in to strengthen it. And so we got rid of sort of the top crust of that from an age standpoint and kept the core of it. So it's still competitive, right? You can win with this core and build around it, right? So
Yeah.
this job is attractive because A, it's Liverpool football, and B, you step in with a squad that's competitive. Or is the conversation, look, we brought you in because we want you here for the next 10 to 15 years. We want you to be a legendary manager at this club. We're going to let you build it your way, and we're going to scrap the whole thing. We're going to fund it, and we're going to go from square from like the flats. So it really just depends on how that conversation kind of talked and went through. Like I personally feel like it's more the first where they're like, hey, we can be competitive now and we can build this around it. Because like the thing that makes me nervous is if you blow it up and you bring in a new manager from the Dutch league, that's a lot to put on one guy, especially if he's the guy that you
Okay.
want long term, right? If you really
Yeah.
want him long term, I think that's really tough.
Yeah, I think I agree to that because I think you are making it by blowing it up more and getting multiple pieces at the same time. You are making it trickier for Slot. I would think Slot is looking at the squad and maybe saying, some of the guys we were talking about in terms of with the red arrow down, maybe he's saying, well, if he was here doing this in my system, he would work better or whatever the case might be. Because everybody kind of assumes this guy was not the first choice, but we don't necessarily totally know that either. This guy has been the one that they had their eye on all the time in terms of being a good fit to the overall ordeal. Do you think so? This puts kind of like the FSG situation a different challenge too, right? Because if they really go out and spend some money, it's kind of like, I mean, they're never in a win-win. It's always a lose-lose. But if they go out and spend a ton of money, a lot of people are going to be like, why don't they give this money to Klopp? He would have won us like 85 titles and stuff like that. But at the same time, I mean, Alan is asking about where the Moneyball money went. I mean, we had this money to spend last year. We made some offers out there. So the money is there. Would they spend it or would they say, see what you got first? And you froze on me.
And here I am. I didn't like the question anyway, so it was perfect. No, I'm just kidding.
Take two.
So the last part I heard is like, would they spend it if they had it, right? Like this window?
Like, would they spend it or would they say, see what you got first? Because if you add, going back to what you were saying, you add another 3-4 pieces. I mean, it's not like the more ingredients you put in, the better the food is going to be. So why don't you take the pieces you like first and we fill in the blanks?
Here's what I like about Edwards. I don't think Edwards looks at it situationally. Like, I don't think, I mean, obviously there's some like financial, like, there's a real world financial consideration in every transaction. But I think Edwards is less concerned about, like, is this going to put us in the red? Like, I think he's more concerned about like he's got a clear set philosophy on player acquisition, right? And if it checks enough boxes and the manager wants it, I think he green lights it regardless, right? Like
Yeah.
I think he looks at that squad, he looks at the depth, is the player age right? Is he the right character? Does he come from the right system? Does it make sense tactically? And I think if enough of those things line up, he gives that manager the green light, regardless of what it costs. And so that's what I like about Edwards
Is
because
that
I
a
think
good
Edwards,
thing if you're the manager? Or I
I
guess
think
does it depend on the type of manager? Because sometimes you gave Klopp a new ingredient. He was like, yeah, it doesn't smell good. I'm not going to use that. And it just like rotted away.
well, I think this just comes down to the fact that they have to agree, right? They have to agree to the
Yeah.
player and the acquisition, right? And if they're on the same page, I think it does work because I think Edwards backs himself. I think he backs himself in a way that, like, he knows what type of player to get and who he wants and can agree with the manager on that. But I think more he backs himself on the back end about getting rid of players. Like I think he
Yeah.
really, and I think that's where he excels. I think he excels on moving players a step before they should probably be moved to getting like, the max amount. And hopefully we see a whole lot more of that, a whole lot less of players just wanting contracts down for nothing.
I mean, we all assumed at the time, and there were a lot of people denying it, but it had to be something to do with Klopp and stuff like that, and not being on the same page and not agreeing and stuff is why he left, and it's becoming more apparent now because as one of them is like leaving, the other guys are like moving in. But at the same time, we assumed at the time a lot of the things they did not agree on was perhaps the over the top player loyalty that Klopp kind of builds a squad around, right? I mean, he's more of a squad and a team spirit builder than the finances part of it, perhaps. Do you think Edwards, like Genie and stuff like that, there were a lot of people that maybe he would have more likely have sold? Doesn't that kind of mean when we have three big players, doesn't it enforce the likelihood of one or two of them being sold or either extended, one or the other, and not just letting
Yeah,
them play out their last year?
yeah, it certainly does. And I think that was the main crux of a lot of the disagreements is not who we were bringing in, but who we were letting go, or more importantly, who we weren't re-signing, right? And
Yeah.
I think that was a big one. And like we only know about the ones that like transpired. There's probably two or three that like Klopp won on, right? That Edwards did resign,
True.
and Edwards was like, we shouldn't have done that, but I'm gonna give you this one, right? Because you can't say no to all of them, right?
Yeah.
So I think that was really the crux of it. I think that'll be interesting to see how that kind of transpires. I think you get a lot less of that from Arnie Slot coming in, but does it stay that way once he's got his guys, right? Because what does that look like in 3 or 4 years once he's got his players that he wants in and they're up for contract extensions, right? So I think we won't know like whether like I think we can assume that it's going to go better and gel a little bit better just on the fact that Edwards is probably not hiring a manager he thinks he's going to have a personality conflict with or a business clash with. But we really don't know until we're 3 or 4 years in how that relationship really looks when it gets to the part where you have to make hard decisions, where Edwards is making those decisions on paper and a manager like Jurgen Klopp is making it emotionally, right? Which is really, really hard to do when you've managed somebody and you've grown a relationship over that amount of time. It's
Yes.
hard not to make that decision emotionally.
Because I mean, as a human, and like we both have been in management, you kind of like make a connection, and you always have this feeling of, I will make it work, or we can make it work. Just gotta do this. It'll work, kind of a thing. Whereas the other guy is probably doesn't have any emotional ties, so probably looking at it more clear, to be honest with you. But at the same time, I've always gone back to this while we say that and maybe say, hey, maybe some wrong decisions were made because they were too emotional. At the same time, you got to give credit that that whole emotional aspect of it and the way he approached the squad and stuff is what builds the
Right.
team as a team.
Right.
So you can't
Yeah.
have one and not the other.
Yeah, I mean that's like it's like every great relationship. A lot of people put up with my nonsense because of the many pros that I have too. Just kidding. I don't have any.
I
But
was
no,
gonna
like
say, what are these pros that you speak of?
I just but I think that is it. I think kind of like Jurgen Klopp's strength was also his weakness, right? And I think that happens with so many people who are like sort of on that genius level, right?
Yeah,
Or excel to that amount, right? I mean, look at Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan and like all these guys like that,
yeah.
right? Not managers, but players, guys that were obsessed with winning, but had like very critical personality flaws, right? I mean,
Yes,
shoot,
and
we could
their
sit
teammates actually hated him. Really,
yeah,
like
look at Suarez, right?
yeah.
Would win at all costs, no matter what. Made people better around him because he was such he was a maniac. Like so, it made everybody train around him harder.
It was always
But
the
then you
threat of
have
him biting them too, but that's a
right, but
different
then you
thing.
have him like the real possibility that he has a psychotic episode on the pitch. So like uh,
Bashes your head into the post or something.
right, right.
Yeah, I mean that's the problem. We always I don't think you can have one or the other. So is this why do you feel like this is a better system? I mean, when we doubted that, when Edwards and Ward was leaving, that it had to be with Klopp. Then, Klopp brought his like uncle or like, distant
Oh,
cousin over to take over and basically just be like the puppet regime over there. Do you think this is that a better system where one guy controls it? Or this is kind of a better system where everybody does their own thing as long as there is some collaboration?
are you saying like was the system where we have Edwards in place better than a system where we had Klopp sort of doing all of it, including transfers?
Yeah, like I mean,
Yeah.
literally, like Schmatke tell Klopp no, or say no. This is the no. We're not getting him. We're getting Ando.
That's so hard because that's so hard because I think that's just a really shitty example of that situation, right? Like I think some managers probably do so much better in that role where they're like where they're involved with transfers and probably do a fairly good job of like managing that. Where I just think that was so fundamentally not Jurgen Klopp's strong suit. As much as he wanted it, like I really do
yeah,
think he wanted all that say. I just think it just wasn't what he was good at, right? And so it's hard to say. It's hard to say that any system is better than what we saw under Edwards because I thought Edwards' ascendancy, like that sort of 2018 through 21 ascendancy, was almost one of the best things you've seen at an executive sporting level in any sport. Like it was like impressive what he was doing, not only from a transfer in standpoint, but from a business out was even better. And it's really similar to what I mean. Everybody bags on City, but City for the last 3 years has been almost flawless in the way that they've sold players. I think you can make
yeah,
the argument they didn't restock enough, but it's hard to restock when you got 115 charges in court. So like I
yeah.
think I think from an executive standpoint, I love this situation because it's somebody that we know and trust and somebody we saw literally work magic over the course of 3 or 4 seasons.
Yeah, I think. I mean, you might be right. I think Boaz was talking about earlier in the comments. That because of the people, I think I definitely like the system more than anything else, because it feels like everybody is doing their expertise, and this was definitely not the case for Klopp or anything like that. But I can also see, like, we don't know Slot, right? Like a new manager coming in having that duty as well. A manager can make, I feel like, a lot more short-term decisions to save their job, to save their season, because they know it's a result-oriented ordeal. So they might make a short-term signing just to fill a void and stuff like that. Whereas when you have these people in place, they're more always, they're I was talking about this morning. They're more playing chess. They're always thinking of like the next step and more like a long-term plan. Yeah, this is great for these 3 months. So those are clubs that do a lot of like movement in January that turns to blow up afterwards because they were short-term fixes and they were not done thinking the long-term picture and stuff. Serzi says Klopp's loyalty made his players run through brick walls for him, where the players were physically exhausted. They mentally kept pushing, and I think that's what we have been missing over the last 2-3 months, because I don't think you're getting that from players anymore, because I don't think they're getting that. They are getting the loyalty. I just feel like Bickler, they are not getting that energy, which is what kind of like what we were talking about in the beginning. I think the loyalty is still there, but it's just it's just because he's leaving. I don't think the players feel betrayed or anything like that. But I think the energy they get from Klopp is just not there anymore. You didn't like this question either, okay?
Yes, I did hear that. So you're right. I don't think the energy is there, or is my Wi-Fi. But I think the reason that energy is not there is like I just don't know like how you get that consistent like surplus of energy and performance when you lose the ability to go for the quad or you lose the ability to go for
Yeah,
those titles and your manager's gone in the summer. Like like what rational human does kill themselves for that, right? Like
yeah,
who would? Certainly not any of us who are critical of the club. Like if we're in the same spot, I know I'd be like, all right, dude, I'm gonna text Slot, see what he wants for lunch. Like, you know what I mean? Uber Eats this thing. Like I'm working my politics on the back end. I'm less concerned about like breaking my back to get through the rest of the season for the manager that's gone in the summer. Like, no matter what. Like I
fair.
think that's just human nature. So I just think it's real hard. And yeah, and I think that's what makes Klopp special is that he was able to get that right. And so I think that's kind of the secret sauce is like Where we had the best of both worlds is when we had an executive team that was able to make business decisions at a super high performing level that transformed this club financially and on the football pitch, and then had a manager that could take that and basically make
Yeah.
it the most dedicated, loyal machine version of itself, right? I think that was the best of both worlds. And I think when Edwards left and Ward left, and like we talked about, there was clearly something that was not meshing from a personality standpoint. We got crushed for that because people are so love Klopp so much they couldn't possibly imagine that like maybe he's tough to deal with. Maybe he's a little bit stubborn. Like, maybe he's a little bit obstinate about things and like maybe he's a little bit slow to change. Like all those things that we kind of wondered, like
Is
we
that
got
due to
crushed for.
experience though, Bickler? Like, you know what I mean? Like, when you're a new manager or when you're new somewhere, at a job or whatever, you might be, but after a while, you're like, dude, I know what I'm doing, back
Right.
off. And then you
Yeah.
might feel like you should have more input. Do you think that's part of it more than a personality thing? As you're there more and get more comfortable, you want to take on more and have more control?
I think that's part of it. I think part of it's just his personality. And I think that goes back to like you achieve greatness, you have to have a natural sort of arrogance a lot of times, right?
Yeah,
Like, I
definitely.
mean, you don't get to that with any sort of typically those people are not portraying like humility as one of their top three traits, right? And so like I think we got when you got a finance guy that feels that way about themselves and probably doesn't feel like they're getting enough credit for it on the pitch, and then you got a manager who feels like they've basically taken probably a squad that a lot of managers wouldn't put at that level and put them at that level. I think there's a natural division that's going to happen, right? And so I think that just reached a breaking point. And really, it's a shame that we didn't get a longer duration of that because I think had Edwards stuck around and they figured out a way to coexist, I think this club has like we always saw that stat. I mean, it was a couple weeks ago, but we saw a stat was like you fixed like 4 matches and we've won like 5 more cups or something ridiculous like that. And that stat keeps going up with every week the way we're playing right now. But it was way cooler like midway through the year when it was like one game. But but I think, yeah, it's a shame we didn't see more of that because I really think that could have been that we would have won more. It could have been a longer legacy. I think if we can get 3/4 of that out of slot and we have the Edwards team, we have the potential for some really, really big, exciting things to continue to happen for this club.
Alan says, I do find it odd that not a single member of Klopp's backroom staff has chosen to stay on after Klopp's departure. I
You
find that
know,
odd that Alan finds that odd, to be honest
yeah,
with you. I mean, because I don't see one. And here's another thing, like when they might say, "Yeah, we're leaving too," and the club might come back and say, or the new regime might come back and say, "Yeah, we'll keep those pieces," but that will be a decision that you want to leave to slots. I mean, if I'm coming in to do a job, I want to have my own crew and I want to build my own crew and probably bring in a lot of my own crew because I'm assuming a lot of the guys at Feyenoord are leaving with him as well. So I find that very natural that when the big guy leaves, because these are mostly his people that came with him as well or that have worked with him. And here's another thing. One, it's hard for the guy who stays because now you're used to something and change is not easy for anybody. And I think it's hard for the new guy coming in to implement change to a person who's been doing the same thing. We've always done it this way. Bullshit is what's going to keep
yeah.
popping up.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that a lot of those guys, like most of them, just didn't get invites back, right? And I don't like. I think when you have this big of a regime change, it's a clean breakup, everything out of the house. Um, yeah, gosh, shame.
Jamie starts I mean, we should put like an over on there, but it'll be in the thousands. Who's gonna keep track
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
puns? But leave it to Jamie to come up with it. Ryan says I find that most sports that coaching staff stick together, and I like I say, if you're building your own management, do you want to have a guy who was clearly very loyal to the old regime? As you're trying to implement stuff, you don't want any other voices in the room that might say, "Yeah, I don't like it either." But yeah, like you just don't want that. You want everybody to be like, "Yes, this is what we're doing." It's not like Klopp came in and took over left over the whole squad. I mean, he brought his own people as well. I think it's just like a natural, and I think it's the ideal way. I don't think those people would want to stay. I mean, I'm sure they would want to keep their jobs, but especially if Klopp was going to another team, I think those people would be going with. Now maybe it's a different scenario, Bickler, because they're ultimately unemployed. Because unless they're gonna like hang out with Klopp and his grandkid.
You never know. It could be Pep pushing the yacht off like from the dock. Like
they got the physio taping the ankle of the baby.
What if they all just like move into like the Klopp compound, right? And like you just see them all in the Greek islands, like spread out like pelicans. Like
yeah, I find that though. I mean, Klopp said even himself, because he said, like he was watching or listening to or maybe reading the transcript of something that Trent had an interview about. Trent talking himself about it is almost a little exciting when a changes happens and it gives everybody a clean slot, as Jamie would say, but like a way to, especially a guy like maybe like a Gravenberg or something like that, reprove themselves, or a guy maybe was a guy like Gomez maybe says, hey, maybe I can earn something else now doing this, as opposed to the like the pre-established notion that they had like on them and stuff like that. So change is good, even though difficult.
I think that's just like the sort of like the unspoken truth here that nobody wants to talk about, right? Because I think we talk about how like they clearly level off and there's a sense of apathy that's been caught from the manager. But you think that we see this level of drop off if they're not ready for the change? Do you know what I mean? Like it feels like a side that's ready, that's just ready for a clean slate, for something new. That's what I feel.
Yeah, just let it happen already, kind of a thing, right? It's like, when you go to the doctor, just like you're gonna get a shot, just freaking stick it in. Let's let's just get this over with, kind of an ordeal. And I think that's human nature too, right? You're gonna think about your own future. These guys' contracts, they're working in a different country. They moved, maybe their families, their family just moved. They might have kids, school, all that kind of stuff. And when we kind of like take it for granted because they have money, but they're still human, and the kids are still human, and they're going to schools and stuff like that. Like it's a lot to think about when you're like looking, like projecting long term. And yeah, anytime you're in a situation where there's a new boss coming, there is going to be one, you might look forward to it, especially if the old one was getting old. uh no pun intended, but like, so like old and tired, I guess I should say. But at the same time, so it's exciting in some ways, but there is probably a little bit of worry or anticipation at the same time, because especially if you are at a higher standing, I think it's easier for a guy who's looking to move up in the rankings with the new manager, but it's more of a concern maybe for a guy who was penciled in.
Yeah, I think that's true. I don't, man. I guess I kind of feel like everybody else, where I'm just ready for the change to see what happens. Um, and I don't know, like I don't know if that makes the summer like better or worse. Like we always have to suffer through the ridiculous transfer months, and I think with the newness, like initially makes it better. But I also don't know, like when we're linked to like 97 Feyenoord players, like whether it makes it better or not either. So. Uh, I'm ready for the change, though. I'm with the squad here, ready to just get this thing changed and see what happens here. It's going to be very, very interesting in a few months here.
Brian says, I think some people cheered me leaving in charge of the retail world. I know I cheered as I was leaving. There were there were a lot of sad faces and tears, but that was before I left. After I left, I don't know, like I heard some fireworks in the background, so there could be people partying after I left too. So that's very possible. So how long are you in Vegas?
I fly out. I got the red eye Wednesday night out of here. So I got tomorrow and Wednesday. I'll be in the office all day and then headed out straight out.
Oh, okay. So it's not that long. It's not that
No,
ridiculous.
pretty brief.
Pretty brief, but you'll make the most of it, I would think, in a very Bickler
Vegas
fashion.
is such a weird city. It's such a weird city. I mean, like it's the mob came to die in the desert and like they brought all their gambling addictions with them and stuff. And there's some weird intrinsic part of Vegas that's so tacky and like unpalatable. but then it also plays to every single one of my vices. So I don't know. It's just
But yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge gambler and stuff, but that's like kind of like our annual mini getaway with Angie after the Christmas craze is over and stuff like that, like early January. I just
yeah.
like the overall. I mean, because maybe I don't have to drive and I can just like, just chill and stuff like that. But it's just like yeah, it's a weird. But I mean, here's the thing though. Like, I think, people go to Vegas and you're at the strip, but that's not really Vegas, is it? That's just it's
I
like
mean,
one big ass tourist attraction, if like, more than anything else. It's a huge museum of Vegas, if you will.
I'm dealing with essentially a management community that manages like 115 Vegas HOAs, right? So it's like when you talk Vegas with them, they don't even know like the Vegas Strip like exists, right? It just is a totally different part of what like people because if you live in Las Vegas, like you're either one like a professional gambler or you basically just came to retire and you don't even go to the Strip. You like live out in the burbs and
Yeah.
then you go to the gas station and play the slots at the gas station. So like it's just really it's such a weird spot. Like Las Vegas, the Strip, what everybody knows is Las Vegas is like completely separate from anything else. Like,
I
and it's
feel like
also
it
like,
is a city though that everybody has to go to at one point.
oh, like I'll tell you, when I was managing in Los Angeles, it was so ridiculous because from Los Angeles, it's only a couple hours away, right? So like during the weekend or on their days off, all the guys would go to like they would just take off to Vegas and like with all these kids that were just with their dispensable income, like going to Vegas for the weekend and stuff. And I was like the younger cool manager, so they did really dumb stuff like friend me on Facebook, and then they'd call out of work and be like, "Sorry, I can't make it. I'm really sick." And I'm like, "Do you know I can see you like at the Bellagio right now? Like you're like I can literally see you at the Bellagio right now." And they'd be like, "Oh, I get it. I can't hear you. I'm breaking up." And like they'd hang up, So
The
like yeah,
reception in the casino is not great.
yeah. If you're anywhere within a 3 or 4 hour radius of Vegas, it kind of sucks everything in like a black hole during the weekends. It's crazy, man. It's so weird.
It is. It's a fun. Yeah, if you've never been, it's definitely like a destination. Even if I'm not like we do gamble a little bit and stuff, but I don't like go there just to gamble or anything like that. But um, Brian Shelton says, "You mean not run down like Atlantic City?" Never been actually, but yeah, I do recommend Vegas to at least one time to see if you like it or not. It's definitely a different vibe. Well, you have fun. I will send you some recommendations. So send it to Bickler if you want him to dine somewhere. He does say he's going to be in the office 85% of the time, but I think
The other 15% I'll be eating. Look at these cheeks.
I think people who know this podcast know that ratio is really freaking skewed, really freaking skewed. But hey, as always, thanks for listening and everybody commenting, do the liking and sharing and all that kind of stuff. Definitely the YouTube channel. Go grab somebody by the ear. If you are not following us on Instagram, do go and check it out as well for the huge giveaway we got going right now. Speaking of the big man Klopp himself, there's like 4 days left. So just go on and over there, check our story. All the right instructions are over there right now. And then have an excellent week, everybody. I'll be back Wednesday morning and I'll see you guys then. Enjoy these relaxed days and all the crappy transfer rumors that are coming out. But have a great everybody. Take care.